when you think about it, you could have just released an airplane minus Accu-sim, but that's not you. I mean, you won't have an aircraft without Accu-sim. Is that like a passion kind of thing, or it's just the unwritten rule? It has to feature that kind of level of simulation.
We always made airplanes that flew accurately. They flew by the numbers, and we were very deep in that regard, always. But there's a long way from making an airplane that flies accurately by the numbers, or by the book, you could say. There's a long way from going from that to making it, I want to say feel right, but it's more than feel. It is flying accurately, but it's on a level that isn't in the book. Mm-hmm. There's a whole world of flight performance that doesn't exist in the manual. It's not just a matter of what's your climb rate, what's your roll rate, what's your cruise speed, what happens when you put the flaps down, that sort of thing. And that's really what this aerodynamic system opened up for us. And for me, I guess if you were to pick one thing, it really is the landing flare, the feeling of landing any airplane, be it a Piper J3, Piper Comanche, Lancer, Aerostar, anything. And that really is when you get to know the airplane, is when you're flying it very slow, very close to the ground, hence a landing, and takeoff as well. Takeoffs are also something that there's an experience when you're ready to take off. You apply full power, like in the Comanche. As soon as you apply full power, it's going to pull to the left. So you're automatically giving some right rudder. You start down the runway. You're going. Now, this is a low-wing airplane. This is not your Cessna 172. So it's not really paying a whole lot of attention to the wind when you're sitting there ready to take off. Whereas a 172, it's always paying attention to the wind because the wing is so high. Mm-hmm. The Comanche kind of, I don't care about the wind. I could be getting 30 knots over here. I don't even know it when I'm sitting on the ground. Comanche. But when you start to roll and you start to pick up speed and you start crossing even just 30, 40 knots, your whole world changes. You're no longer on the ground anymore, but you're not in the air. You're somewhere between the ground and the air. And if you've got a crosswind and you're not prepared for it, you don't know, because you're not going to know the crosswind's there by the feel, sitting there before you take off. You're going to only know the crosswind's there by looking at the windsock. You can see the windsock, and you're going to, oh, God, I got a big crosswind. So that was the experience, that feeling of the aircraft. Every mile per hour, it goes faster. It gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And that slow transition, all of a sudden you're flying. By the time you're, just about to rotation speed, well, the wheels almost don't even matter anymore. Yeah. All the wheels are doing are preventing you from going down. They're not giving you any lateral stability whatsoever. You'll blow right off the runway if you're not paying attention. It can be embarrassing if someone's watching and not paying attention to the crossing. You blow off the runway, you look like a complete idiot. Yeah. So I wanted that experience, and the same goes for landing. When you're landing in a crosswind, people have all different techniques. I basically will crab into that landing. And then before I touch down, I straighten it out in cross control, and then you place, typically, you'll end up having a wing kind of dipped into the wind, and you kind of hit with one wheel first. But that wheel's hitting the ground, you're still doing 60 miles an hour. The wheel isn't really helping you a whole lot. You're still flying, right? And so that's the experience I wanted. And then I wanted the ability to plant the plane. And the Comanche is awesome when it comes to planting because it has those manual flaps. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, back in those days, I know they're all into all the modern stuff. They went, we upgraded to electric flaps, right? If I'm going to lower the flaps in the Comanche, it's boom, bang, down, up, boom, up. So when I land, I want to plant it. It's boom, bang, plant it. I mean, it's like a quarter second. You've taken the flaps from being full down to full up. The plane just goes bloop, and it sits, and you're set. Now, if those are electric flaps, you land, you hit the flaps, and you're like, and it's slow. It's terrible. It's just terrible. I only want hydraulic or electric flaps if I have to, and those are larger airplanes. So it really was a shame. Even the Comanche went to the electric flaps. It really a real shame to go that way. And that again makes the Comanche, the 1959 Comanche, so special because it has that Johnson bar flap. Mm-hmm. It's just glorious. So, yeah, those two things were huge from the flight modeling point of view.
Even about the handling, even about landing, right, or as you call it, planting this thing down. I've never experienced that in Microsoft Flight Simulator, not to this degree. Typically, you're on shore final, you know what you have to do, you have your aiming point, and when you need to, you're going to flare. But the feeling of this thing when you do it, it's very unique. It's actually it's what I would expect flying in real life, and it's quite remarkable when you kind of experience that in a sim, because you're like, hey, that's pretty much exactly what happens. It's great to see. But beyond the aerodynamics, which I'm still scratching my head thinking how you managed to do that, but you also go into a depth of kind of maintenance, wear and tear, like a living, breathing aircraft. I mean, that's part of the Accu-sim brand as well. I mean, it's things break, things wear out. Oil goes bad, water gets into fuel. I mean, you've managed to bring all of that into this as well. I mean, it's quite staggering.
I like to think of engines as organic. I guess technically they're not organic, but it feels organic. It feels like it's a living, breathing thing. And that was really the driving force to making this engine, making it proper from the very bottom up. I mean, we had to go to 6 completely independent cylinders on this engine. Now, it sounds all complicated. You might think, why are you going to get so complicated? The only reason why we got this complicated is because really it's the only way to make the engine feel right. It feels right, and it's infinitely different.
Let me demonstrate why we simulate all these internal components of the engine. Let me show you an engine start. Each cylinder is sending pulses to this airframe. It's like having 6 big rubber mallets just pounding your airframe. Let me demonstrate 3 engine starts back to back. Same aircraft, same conditions. It took a little longer to start. Started right up. That was the longest out of all of them. But I hope you saw there is nothing scripted going on. In fact, those 3 engine starts were the next 3 engine starts that I took. I didn't have to retake these to show different engine starts. Okay, let's try this again, but only now in really cold weather. Now this is a cold-soaked engine. We just gave it 9 shots of primer, and I pulled up our engine analyzer that allows you to look inside the engine. Since the engine is so cold, I'm just going to crank it over a few times with the mags off to get the oil circulating. I just want to demonstrate how the cold affects how this engine runs. Here we go. Crack the throttle. That's a very cold engine. Look at the oil pressure. It's just coming up now. You can actually hear and feel that engine warming up. As it warms up, the RPM will increase. Oh, look how high that oil pressure is at a relatively low RPM. It's because the oil is just so thick. The pump is really working hard to move the oil. Now we do have a weak cylinder. Just listen carefully. If you're ever in doubt, a good way to test your aircraft engine is bring the idle way down. You can see and hear that cylinder misfiring. You see, that almost stalled. But this is what you go through when you fly an airplane. You pay attention to these little things because it's these little things that can become big things when you're flying in the air, especially when flying a single-engine combustion airplane. We also feature a complete walk-around where you can actually grab and feel the linkage in your control surfaces. There's a little bit of play there. It's because these are controlled by cables and pulleys. Little play, that's normal. This is exactly what it feels and sounds like to move the aileron. We'll jump to the tip tank. Tip tanks are awesome on so many levels. I'm going to add fuel here. I want you to listen very carefully. Just listen. Hear that? That's all the way up. Now I'm going to listen again. I'm going to take fuel out. I'm going to drain it. Hear that? Okay, that happens in the real Comanche. That's oil canning. That's basically the wing flexing a little bit, and some of the panels on the aircraft will oil can. They'll pop from one direction to another. That's normal. It's just part of flying with an aluminum skinned airplane. Okay, so we'll go underneath. Now we use this jar and insert it into this drain to test if there's water in the fuel. But just for demonstration, I put some water in this tip tank. Now water is clear. It's not blue like the fuel, so when I start draining, you're just going to see clear liquid, which will be water. And once all the water is out, you'll then see fuel start coming into the jar, which will appear on top. Okay, see? That's water, right? Now watch. Keep draining. There we go. See it? Water, fuel. Let's drain that. Just make sure. Good. We'll jump ahead and show you a tie down. Master artist Mihail Puto made these knots, real knots, and you can hear the sound that's actually pulling it through the Comanche loop. This is where we can chalk it up. And this is how we check our oil. There is a lot to know about what oil color actually is. Oil can go from very black to almost invisible and everything in between. We have a tutorial that explains what oil color actually is and why it's so important. And once you understand it, I promise you'll be changing that oil when it's black. The Comanche has 4 fuel tanks. This is the left main. And we support you visually checking the fuel levels, which is also something you absolutely have to do in flying airplanes. You cannot trust gauges. You got to see that fuel. And the Comanche has its own specific way of filling these tanks, and we will get into this as well in a tutorial. You can check the very important all-moving stabilator and also your rudder to feel nice and tight. And you also have a hands-on baggage station. A medium suitcase, a heavy equipment bag, a toolbox, a small personal bag, and if you've got another traveler, a very heavy suitcase. Aircraft tires are very small when compared to automobile tires, but as far as aircraft tires go, the Comanche has a full-size front tire that makes it great for grass strips. It's a true off-road airplane. That full-size tire out in front completely changes the experience when operating off-runway. And with it, soft field operations are so much fun. And that's because real physics are fun. Now, you're probably thinking, how did you possibly capture those ground sounds without the engine drowning out the recordings? Well, let me show you. Well, a Land Cruiser and a rope goes a long way in capturing awesome ground sounds. So let's get up in the air and talk about the feel of flight.
It's pretty bumpy out here. I would call this light to moderate turbulence. And when you get those sort of bumps that you kind of almost hit your head in the ceiling, that's like moderate turbulence. And this is another thing that just we had to work on, is this feel that you get when you're in the cockpit, because it's very rare that the air is as smooth as glass. I'm going to say 1 out of 10 flights at maximum, at least where I'm flying in New England, the air is as smooth as glass. It's typically like this in a small airplane, and we just needed to deliver this experience.
This is actually pretty calm. You might call this a light chop. This is nice flying weather, and it's just the feeling of the airplane pushing through the air. This is a little bumpier. It's like a light turbulence. Look at that wing. You can see the aerodynamics acting upon that wing, and that wing acts very differently when that tank is full. The airplane is just absorbing all kinds of physics from the engine, from the air, the airframe, the landing gear. It is all feeding feel to you, the pilot. And to experience this inside Microsoft's awesome world is for us the dream come true. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and also enjoy growing with us in this wonderful world of aviation and flight simulation. Thank you.